It is 6:07. Michael O'Hanlon joins us now. As far as I'm concerned, one of the smartest people we ever have on as guests. And we've run the test, Michael. You are.
You're very kind. Nice to be with you, my friend.
Nice to have you back. It appears a deal is going to be imminently signed, knocked through the Senate, signed by Biden. And as the story goes, by the end of the week, the arms Ukraine so desperately needs will be in transit. Does that timeline seem realistic?
Yeah, I think it does. You know, the military is getting ready. They've developed a very good logistics line to Ukraine over the last 2 years in general, and they know this is coming. There's no particular reason they can't sort of almost practically load things on planes even before the bill is signed. Exactly at what step you have to stop prior to signature by President Biden, I don't know how they'll determine that, but they can certainly figure out with Ukraine's military what's needed, and they certainly can fly things to the border region near the Ukraine-Polish border and get ready to put things on trains and trucks and be doing that within a couple of days of notification that it's okay to go.
At the Brookings Institute, when you all get together to discuss these things and talk about various policies that you support, don't support, and have opinions on, to me, in my view, this comes down to one of two things. The reason these things take so long is strictly politics, nothing but politics, or, we're finally at a point where we have to do something, so I guess we've got to do it this weekend. Where do you fall on that?
Well, I think that, you then have to also add in the specifics of the Trump phenomenon and the MAGA view. And within that, there's also two ways to look at it. Sorry to complicate the question before I try to answer it. But the Trump phenomenon on this question partly raises a valid question, which is why should we care more about Ukraine than the U.S.-Mexico border, the fentanyl crisis, et cetera? But then also is changed by the fact that Donald Trump is the mouthpiece, and I don't know that he really wants a serious answer to that question. It's a good question, but I'm not sure he wants an answer. I think he wants a campaign issue. And so in that regard, Republicans who are trying to be supportive of him or at least not get on his bad side have to figure out, okay, where do we draw the line between asking an important question but then also being willing to make a policy go forward? And as you know, this bill does not include the $10 billion or so that was being proposed for dealing with the U.S.-Mexico border and the fentanyl crisis. And that's too bad because I'm not a MAGA Republican, but I do recognize the validity of the question of why do we prioritize Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan over the U.S.-Mexico border. I think the Biden administration has been willing to do a deal that covers all four issues, but that's the piece that I think complicated the politics for Republicans. So, yeah, the politics are what drove the timing. No doubt about that.
And didn't the Lankford bill in the Senate that the Republicans shot down and said out loud, we don't want a Biden win an election year for this? Didn't the Lankford bill start to cover the issues in tandem?
Yes. And, on the one hand, there's a part of this that's always going to be different when Donald Trump is involved because he's such a maverick politician. Whether you like him or not, you have to recognize that. On the other hand, it's not unusual for people to have mixed feelings about, making some big compromise on a red meat political issue during a campaign year. People do like to have their big issues. And, Trump, if he went out and said that Biden did not prioritize the border for 2.5 years, but I finally forced him to do it and we got a deal now, that would be partly defensible as an argument, but it wouldn't necessarily motivate his voters to go and vote on Election Day, because if the issue's been addressed, then you don't need to worry about it. So I think he would rather have it be unresolved. And it's too bad, because I think the compromises that were made, and I'll give Republicans credit, they did increase the political heat on Biden, and he had to do things he previously wasn't willing to do. So I give him credit for forcing Biden to that point, but then they would not take yes for an answer.
Michael, here's a segue to that. In not dealing with the border crisis, but pushing forward funding for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, why is Mike Johnson's job now in jeopardy? Or why are there calls now for, anti-Mike Johnson? He's not doing what he said he was doing. You know what I mean? He ixnayed on the border deal, but pushed forward with Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan.
Well, I'm not an expert on the procedural mechanisms that might now be invoked. However, until they are, my inclination is not to give these 2 or 3 far-right Republicans any more time than they deserve, which is frankly not much because they're less than 1% of the House of Representatives. I think there are 2 or 3 people who are sort of having this conversation.
Right.
And the way they set up the rules, even one person can sort of force the conversation.
Right.
But that's sort of a crazy rule. I don't like the elements of the way the Senate has done business over the years, where one senator can put a hold on, let's say last year, nominations for the Department of Defense.
Yeah, Tommy Tuberville.
Yeah, and I never liked that about the Senate. Now the House is trying to make itself into a big version of the Senate with the same sort of thing. One or two people can grind business to a halt. To me, it makes no sense whatsoever.
What does this mean for Israel and aid there and that tension? And also, what is going on in regards to funding for help with Taiwan as China turns up the heat?
Well, on Israel, I give the Biden administration credit that they have found a way to defuse the immediate crisis between Israel and Iran in a way that I think may allow the exchange of fire to stop for the moment right here where it is. But that doesn't resolve anything about where we go with Gaza. And as you know, last week also had the notable news that we have vetoed at the UN a resolution that would have called for a Palestinian state, which is no surprise. That's the way we've handled things for a long time. But President Biden's trying to persuade Israel to get back on the two-state solution path, and yet vetoes a resolution at the UN that would create a Palestinian state. I understand the reasons, but it's not a very simple, clear message to the American voter or the broader world. And so, it just goes to underscore that we're having some tactical success here with, the Israel-Iran relationship, but no resolution of the underlying strategic problem and what to do about Gaza once the looming operation around Rafah is complete, because they're still not going to have destroyed Hamas completely. They're still not going to have all the Hamas leadership either killed or arrested.
Right.
And so they're going to have to figure out some other pathway that involves politics. And right now, they're not showing much willingness to do that in Israel. So I think they need a little more tough love from their American friends.
Okay, that was my next question. What is the end game in all of this? Iran, obviously, and Israel now, they're trying. If this escalates to the next level, when does everybody else get involved?
I don't know. I think the main point I would draw, because your question is haunting, and I don't know how to answer it, which means that as long as this problem goes on with Gaza, we should all be a little nervous and not celebrate too many. President Biden said to Israel, take the win in terms of intercepting all those drones and missiles a week ago. And I guess I know what he means, but it's like saying take the win because you're ahead after the first quarter of a football game.
Yep.
There's no real win here yet until this thing gets stabilized. And I think Israel is going to need to get back to a two-state solution.
Yeah.
That used to be the most obvious thing in the world to say, but Israel and Israeli politics don't really accept that anymore. And I understand why Israelis are still reeling from October 7th, but you need a political endgame. And the Palestinians cannot be deprived of a state forever. So I just think we have to get back to that.
It's Michael O'Hanlon at the Brookings Institute. Michael is an American policy analyst and director of research, senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Program. A little prediction. Put on your prediction hat. Get out your globe. What is it? Not a globe. What's the thing you predict with? Crystal ball. Magic 8 ball. How about a magic 8 ball? Where's the story at the end of the week?
This story at the end of the week won't probably have changed very much, because we'll all be exhaling a little bit more, as you started by saying, I think correctly, that weapons will be flowing by the end of the week or very close to doing so. And so people will allow themselves to think about something besides the Middle East for a few minutes
right.
until it demands our attention again. And so there won't be a long respite, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Michael. Enjoy your day.
You too, my friends.
There you go.
Good talking
Thanks,
with you.
Michael.
Michael O'Hanlon. He's a good guy. He's a guy. You know what, Nick? Honestly, I wouldn't mind if Michael just dropped the weapons off himself. Just put them in the back of the Volvo.
Yeah. There you go.
Because I know they'd get there. I'd completely trust him to do it.
Driving might be a little difficult, though, to get there.
Probably too simple a solution.
Maybe.
Well, you got to remember how simple I am.